Thank you to my channel members and Ko-fi supporters that make these videos possible. You can also support me by buying a deck tech on my weekly Tuesday and Sunday streams. More info in the video description. Hello everyone! With the Final Fantasy Reveals season starting up soon, I figured a few of you would probably run into this conundrum again. Finding places for new cards in your decks. This will also give me some time to revisit Judith the Scourge Diva and Farrakha and talk about how they evolved over time with new sets as examples. A lot of deck building websites allow you to tag your deck. I think this feature is generally worthless for someone outside looking into the deck. Whoa, he put removal in the removal category, guys, and he gave it a funny name! I kid. I do this with my own decks for fun because I do find tagging useful sometimes, mostly when you're trying to find cuts for your deck. I neglected to cover tagging in my cutting cards video, which this video will have some natural overlap with, but here I go. With tagging, you can find what groups exist in your deck. So for my Kellen deck, for instance, I have a pile of creatures alongside Congregation at Dawn because this is the core point of my deck. These cards are untouchable. There's also a section for protection, stacks, ramp, etc. By dividing the deck into pieces like this, you can find bloated categories without a lot of compactness. Take ramp and removal for instance. Insidious Fungus is shared between them. Without Insidious Fungus, if I just ran Explore and Disenchant, I'd suddenly have a 101 card deck, which would actively be bad. By consolidating it into one card, it gives more room for additions. This is the first recommendation I have. If you want a good way to consolidate deck space, I'm going to mention tutors. Of course, tutors are just good to be running in a singleton format, and can be quite boring if you run them as the second copy of the best game-winning card or combo in your deck, but legitimately, having a toolbox of creatures you can grab is one of the best ways to still be interacting with a game of Magic, and still have room for the fun stuff you want to do with your deck. Take for instance, Chord of Calling in Kellen. Thanks to its instant speed nature, it is a protection spell because it can grab Werefox Bodyguard or Guardian of Faith. It can be removal since it can grab the previously mentioned Insidious Fungus or Solitude. And it can be value thanks to cards like Beast Whisperer, Eladamri Korvik Doll. You get the idea. I have a slew of one-off effects stapled to dorks in this deck that can all be found with creature tutors. And this lets me get away with running less removal than I would have to, allowing me to run more silly cards I wanted to jam in here, like Surak, Elusive Hunter, or the brand new Clarion Conqueror, both of which would be fine cuts if I needed to untutorize my deck. So finding cards that can fit in multiple categories and running toolboxes are good ways to shrink your deck to find new cards. What's the final thing that tagging allows you to do? Well, going back to Kellen, after I finished tagging up the deck for the first time, I realized something odd. Luminarch Aspirant was sitting there and didn't belong to any category. It wasn't aggressive enough for the Die category, and it certainly wasn't protection, removal, stacks, or ramp. Well, I just have to say, congratulations to the lucky few of you who experienced this, since that right there is a free cut, unless it's some super important pet card. Luminarch was originally in there to synergize with Kudo, but with Elishnorn, Map Tokens, Champion of Lambhold already there to do that, it was really a redundant piece. I swapped it for Qasali Pridemage, which was a removal spell that would still pump an attacker into a hard-to-block 3/3 when Kudo is out, making everything 2/2s. It also works well with Cutsil too. So then, we talked about how tagging can help establish easy cuts or bloated categories in need of condensing, but when it comes to adding new cards to your deck, you really have to identify, do I really need this card? Nature's Rhythm and Kishla Village are shoo-ins for Farrakha. These were easy to add for New Tarkir, but what did I end up cutting for them? Well, for Kishla, it was Restless Cottage. The deck runs enough fixing and Grave Hate to get away with this. That one was easy. I also couldn't cut a Forest because the deck really enjoys Arbor Elf as a dork that synergizes with Utopia Sprawl and Wild Growth. But for Nature's Rhythm, I cut a recent addition to the deck. Defiled Crypt Cadaver Lab, which is a Disentomb on one side of the room and a Token Maker on the other. My Farrakha deck is all about cards leaving the graveyard. That's why I was so interested in building it. But alas, the only thing I run that are triggered off such a thing in the deck with the loss of Defiled Crypt are Insidious Roots, and that's it. It turns out Tormod, Omzu, Sir Conrad, all these cards that trigger when Farrakha exiles a card from my graveyard were all incredibly win more, and slowly they've all been getting cut one after the other from my deck. Making tokens seems like it'd be beneficial to Farrakha, but once you realize that Farrakha has no issue doing that by herself, and a 1/1 Death Touch enchantment synergizes a lot better with an Overrun or Destiny Spinner better than a 2/2 zombie ever could, these cards really lose their luster, and it's much better to run cards that draw cards or mill to keep the hand full and to find the winning plays of Destiny Spinner or Thunderfoot Baloth. Roots only remains because the plants it makes are truly colossal, and it makes all of my creature tokens into mana dorks. This is what I meant when I told you to ask, do I really need this card? Something can look good for a deck on the surface, but turn out not to be what the deck requires at all. It's okay to try it, of course, but if it turns out not to be the best fit, never be afraid to go back on your swap. I might honestly end up doing that with Kellen and Clarion Conqueror, since it does friendly fire a bit of the deck's dorks, even though it can be backbreaking into the correct opponent. This is the same story that came up in Tekathal, my artifact charge counter proliferation combo deck. In Tarkir Dragonstorm, we got a new card that synergizes with charge counters, Adaptive Training Post. See, look, it says charge counters right there. You can move them around with nesting grounds, proliferate them like crazy to do double instants and sorceries, all that fun stuff. Hooray! Except, of my 26 instants and sorceries in Tekathal, 7 of them are counter spells that get very marginal upside in exactly one situation. Counter Wars, when copied, and the rest of them when copied don't do anything game warping besides drawing twice as many cards or giving me another proliferate. Listen, the card isn't awful by any means. It just doesn't actually further the deck's wins in any meaningful way. Are you adding that new card to spin the wheels? Is it actually tangibly furthering your game plan, or is it just getting added to your deck because it shares words with other cards in the list? If you think it's fun regardless of that, of course, add it. But this advice can help you avoid making a very painful cut. Not every new toy is necessary. Now then, I really wanted to highlight a deck that got incredible from a new set swap. And there's a lesson attached to this, so stick with me. It's time I revisit my Judith deck. Judith is actually one of my oldest commander decks, and she really got invigorated with the printing of 9 Lives Familiar. Judith has some iconic aristocrat combo lines, and it can have a colossal game-killing non-infinite play with Living Death or Prowling Geistcatcher. But in all honesty, it had trouble closing out games without finding one of the infinites and or Living Death effects if it didn't get a good aggressive start. I mean, the deck always ran Vorpal Sword. It has killed people with it more often than any deck I've ever seen, but it's mostly there as a death touch equipment for Judith to turn into a Doomblade machine gun. What I needed was a way to kill a player with what the deck was already doing. That's when Grievous Wound got printed in Duskborn, and holy hell does this card just evaporate an opponent with Judith or a Goblin Bombardment in play. Exactly what I needed. What did I cut? Well, with my really low curve in the deck, I cut Rakdos Signet. With this card, Judith became that much more resilient in games where a combo or Living Death win was just beyond my reach. A very good, flashy, fun addition. But what if I told you there was an even better card from Duskborn that made the cut that was far more innocuous, that I would call one of the most consistently good cards in the deck? It's Dissection Tools. On the surface, this card is awful. That's because it is. Here though, Dissection Tools is insanely good because it's never a dead draw. Death Touch Lifelink 4/4 for 5 is its worst mode, which, albeit, is pretty bad. But that's not a dead play in every situation, like when you're getting beaten to death. Where it really shines though is as a sorcery speed sack outlet and a Death Touch enabler for Judith. It even comes with the first non-token sack fodder for free in the form of the manifested card, albeit you don't get the Death Touch for that first sacrifice. Anyway, this is all meant to say that even though a set might have a lot of huge flashy cards for your deck, it's all about analyzing the floors and the ceilings of those cards. The ceiling of Grievous Wounds is game-winningly powerful, but the floor is a dead draw that will never do anything. The Dissection Tools is far more innocuous, but it is now a crucial part of Judith. Both are valuable in the deck's current state, but if I had to cut just one, it'd be the Wounds every time. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the Where Are They Now for my commander decks in this video, and let me know if any of this advice was useful for your situation. I keep primers and lists up to date on my Moxfield decks that have them, so if you want to see what new additions there are for each set, you can check there. I also made another video about cuts a month ago that can have useful advice for new set swaps. Thanks for watching, and until next time.